morning from London here and from Signicat. Welcome to our webinar, Seamless Cross-Border Growth, Leveraging Identity Verification, brought to you by Signicat and in collaboration with Wolt. My name is Pinar Alpay. I'm the Chief Product and Marketing Officer at Signicat, and I will be your moderator. And thank you for joining us today. We're happy to have all of you here as we explore how digital identity verification solutions can help businesses expand seamlessly across borders. Whether you're joining us from Europe or beyond, I'm sure you'll find some valuable insights in today's session. But before we dive into our agenda, I'd like to introduce to you today's speakers, each of whom brings unique experience and expertise to our discussion. First, we have Allard Keuter. He is Authentication Tribe Lead at Signicat. Allard is our resident digital identity expert. With his extensive experience in identity verification across various markets, which include setting up the eIDs scheme in the Netherlands, Allard will provide insight into the European landscape of eIDs and eIDVs. Hello, Allard.
Good morning. Excited to be here.
Fantastic. We're also joined by Anniina Heinonen from Wolt, a company known for its impressive global growth and its excellent customer experience. Anniina is Managing Director of Payments at Wolt, and she will share her insights into Wolt's journey, particularly the challenges and opportunities they've encountered with cross-border expansion. Welcome, Anniina.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Fantastic. Now the introductions have already happened. Let me give you a quick overview of what we will be covering today. We will begin with an exploration of the European identity landscape and the ways that eIDs and ID verification, eIDVs, are making cross-border expansion smoother and more compliant. Following this, we'll hear from Anniina at Wolt about Wolt's strategies, challenges, and the ways they have leveraged digital identity verification in their global growth journey, working with Signicat. And finally, I will sum up the key insights from this session, and we will open up for Q&A session to answer your questions. You can submit your questions at any time in the chat, and I will be keeping an eye on that. This webinar is especially relevant today as more businesses are expanding into new markets, yet facing increasingly regulatory and compliance requirements that can vary across borders. In addition to this, user attitudes to identity verification vary significantly across the European landscape, which makes providing a smooth and inclusive user experience even more complex. Using digital identity verification methods in combination, such as eIDs and eIDVs, is a game changer, helping companies streamline user verifications while staying compliant and efficient. Our goal today is to unpack how a unified identity verification approach can simplify these processes and support your business's growth strategies. That said, let's get started. I'll now hand it over to Allard, who will kick us off by diving into the current landscape of eID and eIDVs across Europe and beyond.
Thank you, Pinar, and thank you for the great introduction. Yes, so today we are going to talk about eIDs and eIDVs. And maybe it's first to an idea to start with what is an eID and an eIDV, of course. Most of you will probably know, but maybe some don't. So eIDs, they are usually an app or a web service, usually from governments or banks, but can be others as well, where you have onboarded once using different means that can be face-to-face, that can be using video onboarding or anything. And you've gotten credentials, and those credentials you can use again and again, basically to authenticate yourself using that same bank or that same government service. That is one. eIDVs, on the other hand, are usually more a one-off process, right? Where you do a identity verification based on usually an identity document, such as a driver license or a passport, identity card. And that is usually used in combination with a biometric check or a liveness detection to verify that the user that is presented on the document is also the one presenting the document, right? So that you have a secure way to identify the user. Both ways are actually can be equally secure and can be used for many different use cases. But we will talk about that more in a minute. If you look at Europe, the identity landscape is actually quite complex. There are definitely more eID-oriented countries, and there are more eIDV-oriented countries, usually for historical reasons. And there are countries where you use a mix of both, because the penetration of the solutions is not 100% for both. So that means that it is actually quite a complicated structure. And of course, you need to, if you are a international corporate, you need to cover all of those methods to make sure that you can onboard and can authenticate your users. If you look across Europe, you see this nice map. There you see that historically the Nordics have been most predominant in using eIDs. Usually because governments or banks have introduced the method at some point in the early 2000s in many cases, and they have corporations that set up the identity scheme and made sure that it is available not only for the banks or only for the government, but across the entire market basically. And that is quite successful. And as you can see in the availability of the eIDs, but also in the adoption, that basically the adoption of these methods are really, really high, and they are really used for many, many use cases. So in other countries where the eIDs are not as dominant, there are usually private party players that have stepped up to make sure that there is an identity verification method based on the documents that can be used to also identify the user online. And those companies and those methods can be as successful as the eIDs for the onboarding, of course. eIDAS actually made a big change in this because eIDAS, when it was introduced in 2014, stimulated all the countries basically to form an eID, to make sure that an eID was available in the country, and to make sure that the eIDs can be recognized across borders. The downside of eIDAS was that it is only mandatory for governments. So that means that there is now a scheme or a mechanism to recognize let's say a Polish identity in Spain and vice versa. But that is not usable for the private sector. So it's still very limited in that sense. The consequence of eIDAS was that there are eIDs now not only in Nordics, but all over the place. But they are in various stages of development. So some of them are very early stage, and some of them are, of course, more mature. But it's still a very fragmented landscape. Nowadays, talking about the eIDAS, I should, of course, in eIDAS 2, which is a regulation adopted last year, or this year actually. But we will talk more about that later. But that is upcoming. Adoption, then, I think that is the most important reason to look at eIDs. And as you can see in this picture, adoption varies a lot across Europe. To be honest, it's as I mentioned, historically the Nordics are most dominant in the use of eIDs. But I have to be fair that getting the accurate data on adoption is actually quite a challenge. So what we've used here is a number of sources, and you will get those sources in the report. More about that later. But it is one of the most important sources is Eurostat, that basically collects the data across Europe on the use of eIDs as well. And what you obviously see is that, countries like Spain and Germany are a bit on the low end of the scale, while the Balkan region is not present at all. And to be fair, with the onset of the eIDs, all countries have put effort in more government-led initiatives to provide an eID, but not all countries have gotten as far. So that explains the huge difference. As I said, eIDs 2 will probably bring a new impulse, but not exactly on the same type of technology. So that's a change. The report shows more detail about the data that we have gathered on the different eIDs, and also the eIDs that are present, that we support, of course. We get the report first, so that is a nice add-on. But diving into the details of the eIDs a little bit more, if you look at the main use cases, it's important to understand that eIDs, in a sense, are about onboarding, but they're also about authentication. So that is the log-on function for your returning customer, which is a big difference from eIDV. Signing is also important. If you look at signing, you need, of course, to identify the signee, the one signing a document, and for that you can use actually both eID and eIDV. So they're both used, but that's also an important use case. To be fair, if you look at eIDs, they're also used for other use cases, such as verifying a bank account or confirming a payment or age verification even. But those are not common all over Europe. So, but these three are usually supported by all the different eIDs. Then this is what we support in Europe on the eIDs. So we have over 35 methods that we cover in our eID hub, and the idea is, of course, that with this you can basically have one connection, one integration to Signicat's eID hub to make sure that you can cover all those countries. And you can use them for any use case available, right? We support at least authentication and onboarding and signing use cases. And in many cases, we also support all the other relevant use cases to make sure that that you can use them accordingly. And that means that you can not only use it for onboarding, but also for the recurring users, the returning customer. The latest additions were actually SPIT in Italia and Moje ID in Poland, which in both cases we were the first, let's say, non-local integrator to be able to offer the service. So we're quite proud of that. And we have actually some of the wallets that are now becoming mandatory under eIDs 2. We have them in pilot, so it's we are working on the future as well. If you look at our eID hub, then you see that we offer different technology standards that are that can be offered to make sure that you can integrate in your own way with your own protocol or with your own technology stack based on your own IT landscape, basically, rather than having to integrate all the different eID proprietary protocols, because all the eIDs have most of them at least have basically have set up very proprietary protocols that only work for that specific eID, and integrating them is, believe me, quite a challenge. Of course, adding eIDs is then a lot easier, so you can basically configure it rather than integrate, have an integration project from the start. So it's configuration. That's good. You can enrich the data, because we don't only have the eIDs, but we also have a lot of other data sources and, of course, eIDVs on our platform. But those data sources can be very interesting to enrich the data that you can get from an eID, for example, with address information, bank accounts, etc., depending on your use case, of course. And we have sandbox and documentation available. And it is an important point to remember that this not only involves, let's say, the technical integration, but also the contractual or legal integration, because what we usually offer is when we are allowed to, which is in most cases, is that we offer one contract that covers all the terms and conditions coming from a specific eID. If you look at the eIDs, they all set their own terms and conditions, how and when you can use it, and what is allowed and what is not allowed. And we translate that basically to one contract, so that you don't have to do separate contractual processes with all the different vendors. Then eIDV, because that is, as said, the natural complement to an eID. In every country where an eID doesn't exist, the eIDV is the most logical choice to identify your user. As I mentioned, they are a little bit different from the eIDs in the sense that they are rarely used for authenticating, but mostly for onboarding. It's important to keep in mind that that onboarding process can actually be very fast and can be on the same level of assurance or same security level, if you want, as a face-to-face check. So there are standards that make sure that the way you identify a user online is actually as secure as a face-to-face identification. And in some cases, even more secure, to be honest. It can also form the basis to issue a certificate so that you can use that for signing, which can also be at the highest level of legally recognized signatures, which is called the QES, or Qualified Electronic Signature. And it can be tailored usually in the sense that you can also set it at a less secure but more easily performed process to make sure that the risk level is to your appetite, basically. So that is what an eIDV is. This is what it looks like. This is the example for Video ID, which is a Signicat product in this case. And here you see the process, basically. This is a video process. So you take a video where you are asked to present the front side, the back side of your identity document. You need to smile to the camera to perform the liveness check to make sure that the user is actually the one also present on the document. A one-time password. And then you see the results basically as a video. And you can see that video on the right-hand side of this slide, where all the information, the data information is presented, and you see some of the security items as well, where you say this is a go or no go on this particular identification. Because all kinds of fraud checks, of course, are done at the same time. And it's important to keep in mind that this basically works across all platforms because the only requirement is access to the camera. So key benefits of such a solution are fast onboarding. It can be done in 25 to 50 seconds. It has user guidance, so it's very easy to use. It's automated, obviously, so you don't have to wait for an agent. Many other solutions, you get a live interview with an actual agent, a person at the other side, where you have to do sort of an interview. But this works in an asynchronous way, as it's called. So the video is recorded and it's checked by an agent in almost the same time, but it doesn't need to hinder your onboarding process. So you can go on as a corporate with whatever process you have, and you will get a back channel result basically saying, hey, this particular identification was approved, or there are some checks to be done. As I said, it works on any device, so that's good, and it covers basically all regions and a lot of documents, and so it works internationally really good. Another important feature is, of course, detection, anti-fraud detection, because this is where you are potentially vulnerable. And of course, that is part of the solution, right? There is an extensive machine learning algorithm present that does all kinds of different checks to counter all kinds of attack profiles. And that machine learning basically means that it is also continuously updated with the latest insights and with the latest fraud attacks that are possible. So it remains secure. That's the most important part. Then, if you are an international player, you need to combine these different verification offerings, depending a bit on the regions where you're active. But we will see that it even within, let's say, an eID-oriented country, an eIDV can be very relevant. And you need the combination basically to enable cross-border expansion and have one approach, one way of working, one integration, etc. One vendor basically that can cover all those solutions, and a partner that actually works with you to expand further out. And of course, you need the focus to improve the UX and to make sure that it's inclusive and that it covers all the different edge cases and that it continuously improves conversion, because that is what you want. And to be able to offer all the different methods depending on the region is actually already bringing you quite close to that, because you can offer a user the method what he or she is used to, right? It's the method. If you are in Finland, you use FTN because that's what you're used to. If you are in Spain, you use an eIDV method, video ID, because that's what you're used to, and that's already improving conversion. And of course, together with extensive branding and integration options, you can also influence the conversion and the message to the user as well, and the UX. An example then, this is a customer that we have called University of Turku, which is in Finland. What they have is they have 20,000 students, but 7% of those are international students coming from all over the place. And they don't have access to the local eID, of course, to basically become a student. So if you want to onboard those students, that's all happening in one period, right, during the spring. And previously, that took about 30 minutes with a live interview and presenting documents over a video call and with all the with none of the security checks. And that was done by university staff basically, and during the busiest time of the year. So that wasn't working, and it wasn't secure. So here specifically for this Finnish customer, we introduced the video ID solution to make sure that any user from any student from anywhere on the world can become a student of the university. So that's an interesting example. A few other examples, because that's where you can see it working. The first one is an online casino company. As you know, casino companies or gambling companies are regulated these days, and this is one of them. And they had a need to cover 6 countries to start with, and an expansion plan to 11 countries. And those countries are very different, right? So they needed the mix of eID, eIDV, but also some of the data sources that we can use to enrich the data, because they needed also the proof of address and a affordability check. So that is what we are offering, and that means that they basically could expand into new markets that they were allowed to in 2-3 weeks' time. Because that's how quick it could be for them, and the eID was not the burden. A global payment provider then, as you can see, their focus was mostly on conversion. They had different solutions for the different countries previously, which wasn't really working and wasn't relying much on the local eIDs, for example, and using us with the focus on conversion that we have, and basically the mechanism to pick up users that dropped out of the process, etc. We have been able to increase their conversion rate a lot, almost 20%. And they use us for basically, KYC onboarding, AML proof onboarding, including the PEP sanction checks. So that is and a signature when it's for new merchants that accept the method. So that's how they are using us. And to continue a bit on the strength of combining the two methods, if you are combining the method, you can also use it to basically onboard to your own reusable identity solution, right? Which can be your own identity store, your own managed process, and we have the tools to help you in that as well, to make sure that you have a good, strong customer authentication mechanism in your app, so that onboarded users using an eID method or video ID can actually be also authenticated as a returning customer. So that you can combine basically the strengths of all of it. That includes also step-ups. If you are onboarding with a eID, for example, that is only, let's say, on the level of assurance called substantial, which is a sort of the in-between level, you can upgrade that level of assurance in case of a higher risk transaction or a fraud case or a suspected fraud case with an eIDV, for example. And of course, you can use it for both for electronic signatures. Now, one final example then. This is one of the larger Norwegian banks that is expanding across Europe, as you can see, to Spain and Germany as well, and in the Nordics. And they are using us for all the methods that we have to gather new customers, so the KYC process. But they also use us for the returning customer, so the reusable identity. So what we do is we onboard it to them, and we also issue the credentials for a which is called a mobile ID solution, which is basically to authenticate the returning customer, so that the solution can be used for any logon. And that is an in-app integration, and the results are basically that it's already live, right? That's a seamless integration, that it's PSD2 and SCA compliant, and it has a huge increased conversion rate as well. So this is again an example to use the combination of eID and eIDV to create your own identity, and this is and to do a cross-border onboarding. Then, as promised, my final words on eIDAS 2. As you probably know, the European Commission, by the words of Ursula von der Leyen, presented that they will introduce something called a secure European identity, digital identity, and that is actually a plan that is already well underway. It's now 4 years later. The new regulation was adopted in May, and there are 4 large-scale pilots now well underway, where Signicat is actually participating in 2 of them. And the idea is of those large-scale pilots is to test out the new standards, to make sure that new use cases are tested, and that we actually pilot some of those wallets, because the wallets are the core of this regulation, with new users, so that we can see how they adopt it. We're learning a lot, and we will make sure that our customers can also support wallets next to the existing solutions. So we will have wallets, eIDs, and eIDVs. But it's, of course, too much detail to go into that now. So watch out for more specialized webinars on that topic of the wallets. And with that, I will gladly hand over to Pinar.
Thanks, Allard. Now we are handing over the presentation to Anniina, who is going to talk about Wolt's journey in dealing with cross-border expansion. Over to you, Anniina.
Great, thank you, Pinar, and thank you, Allard. Really interesting insights. Hello, everybody, from my behalf, and super happy to be here and share our greetings from Wolt. We have a long-standing relationship with Signicat already, and we have been happy to find a partner who is equally passionate about identity and compliance as we are. It might come as a surprise to many that identity verification is actually one of the business critical layers for Wolt across our multiple different markets, and doing it in a scalable business supportive manner is an absolute necessary. I will discuss today two topics. First of all, growth, how we have grown, because it basically sets the scene for the complications in this field, which also Allard referred to, the scattered markets and different behaviors and so forth. And then I will shed a bit more light on why is identity verification, and especially in digital format, why is it such an important topic for us. I hope that Wolt is a familiar company for many of you already. So basically what we do is that we are a technology company by heart, bringing together end users who are in need of products, goods, and merchants who are then willing to provide their offering to these customers, delivered by our couriers, and our app is basically the core that brings these different stakeholders together. The nature of our business is very hyper-local. So one of the things that we are really also passionate about is that through our service we can keep the cities alive and make cities better places to live. We just celebrated our 10th anniversary a few weeks back. Our journey started in Finland in 2014. We have expanded from Northern Europe to multiple new market areas, and actually today we are present in 28 markets, from Iceland to Israel and from Serbia to Japan. It's been quite a journey. One layer that I will add on top of our geographical expansion, and of course our expansion in different categories, from restaurant food to groceries and pet supplies and flowers and pharmacy and all that, is that we are also licensed payment and e-money institution operating in Europe and Israel. And that journey started in 2021 when we first got the payment institution license, and then continued this spring when we expanded into e-money license. And naturally, these licenses, even though they provide great opportunities to introduce financial services towards our different customer segments, come with heavy strings attached, and therefore why compliance is such an important part of our everyday lives. So this is the overall picture, and as I mentioned, the complexity, this picture might tell its own story. So as said, we are present in 28 different markets, covering over 40 million registered users, and over 250,000 courier partners, 150,000 merchant partners, running the compliance operations and money flows on top of all the other business transactions we have with the stakeholders is a handful. In a sense, we could say that we are lucky that many of the markets are in Europe. We have over 20 markets that we have in Europe. And there are certain layers which have been harmonized, also from compliance point of view, because for sure we also have markets, especially in Asia, which play with their own rules and regulations without much harmonization. Of course, from our point of view, it means that we need to tailor everything for each market. But we do have our challenges in Europe as well. There, as mentioned, different behaviors, and even though, for example, from the compliance regulation and payments regulation point of view, even though we have European-wide directives, the local requirements are still specific, and all the opportunities that we can find to apply one unified solution across multiple different markets is warmly welcomed. And even with that, we still need to take one market at a time and do our best to accommodate to each one's needs. Diving deeper into, one more thing about, just to celebrate our 10th anniversary. Here is a summary of what we have been doing the past years. And this tells its story about the volumes again, which is bringing one additional layer of complexity. But let's go deeper into the actual topic. The reason for why we need to be so passionate about identity verification starts from the fact that we are a financial services platform. If we think about the basic use case of Wolt, the basic customer journey is that the end user orders, let's say restaurant food, pizza from the merchant, which is being delivered by a courier. The question is, how hard can this be? This is probably not the hardest part, but when we start adding layers, first of all, acting as a financial services platform, in order to execute that food delivery, there is kind of a payment flow or money flow, which goes to the opposite direction. And in order for us to enable the end users' payments to go to the merchants and couriers, it's a chain of multiple different stakeholders and multiple different phases. Altogether, there will be at least 10 different stakeholders in the value chain, out of which at least 6 are banks and bank accounts. Of course, then in the regulated payment space, there are the KYC, KYB, different AML, financial crime prevention obligations. And that's where the identity verification, knowing our customers, is essential. So it's kind of a heavy foundational elements that we have in our obligation to prevent financial crime, and, for example, run full-blown KYC, KYB procedures, as, for example, any bank would be required to do. We have started to resolve these challenges use case by use case. And of course, once we received the payment institution license in 21, the first question was that how do we ensure that we comply with the European regulations? Merchants in Europe were actually our first payment institution customers. And from the get-go, we had to introduce KYC, KYB processes. At that point, we had 17 markets in Europe under the payment institution. So we had to ensure that we have a compliance setup in place in a relatively short period of time for all these 17 markets. And as I said, we were happy to initiate the discussion with Signicat, because Signicat was the service provider to enable the electronic identification in a scalable manner across all these markets. We understood it also from the very early on that, like coming from Finland and having used to bank IDs and FTN for a couple of decades already, it felt weird that we still have quite a few markets where simply electronic identification wasn't a thing at all. So there was also, we acknowledge that in many cases, we are the ones teaching the merchants to go through an eID path, and naturally then with I would say slightly less mature markets, video was the tool to manage that. With the merchant use case, this is very business critical in a sense that this is part of our merchant onboarding process. And once all the sales activities have been conducted and contracts signed, there is very high eagerness both on our and merchant side to start off the business activities as soon as possible, meaning that it puts a lot of pressure on the onboarding experience. And naturally, in the merchant KYC, KYB, the identity verification of the representatives of the merchant companies is just one part, but doing that as frictionless methods as possible is super important. And now we are at that stage that all 20 European markets are covered. We are together with Signicat defining also the roadmap to introduce additional electronic identification methods, because our approach always is that we want to enable the existing electronic identification method, naturally providing that there is like high enough adoption rates in the given markets, and then video is the fallback method, and then especially in countries where none of the eIDs has really achieved traction, video is then the prioritized method. Shortly after implementing the merchant KYC and B processes, there was a new use case on the end user side. We have been expanding our service categories for some years already, and categories outside of the traditional restaurant business are growing on a very high pace. For example, in Finland, this segment already represents 25% of all the orders. And among the things that people want to order rapidly to home are different restricted items like medicine or alcohol already in many of our markets, which then pose the question that how do we verify the person who is making the order is first of all eligible to do that, and then is the same person receiving the goods. And then we luckily already had a lot of technical capabilities together with Signicat already in place. So we equipped the identity verification solution for user age verification, which Allard already also briefly referred to. But it's definitely, again, one of the business enabling features that we have. Similarly to merchants, customer experience is absolutely key. Customers' kind of attention span when they are doing the purchase is very short, meaning that customer experience with the age verification, the time spent needs to be even shorter, super convenient and smooth. Otherwise, they will drop off and so the purchase won't be completed. So we are passionate about customer experience. It's in the core of everything, and providing a method that is convenient for customers has been really a critical thing. And now the latest use case that we have is actually to do with the e-money license. If you have ever received Wolt gift cards or used Wolt gift cards, you have actually been using our e-money e-wallet already. And again, as we are talking about regulated financial service, there are also KYC requirements applying to this service, meaning that we need to ensure that we know who is using our financial services, and the electronic identification is again the enabler for that. Similarly, as with two previous examples, that the customer experience is critical, it's with, for example, with these financial services, in some cases we know that we need to persuade the customer to use and persuade them to go through the onboarding and such, so we can't make it burdensome for them. Going forward, we for sure also with stricter regulation or strengthening regulation identify additional use cases. The best part here is that we have the integration. We have one partnership, one relationship where we can discuss all possible different use cases going forward, plan ahead, do the work on the road mapping side, and kind of get those aligned. Which means that once we come up with the new service or solution, we can easily then plug on these elements in our existing markets, also in the markets where we are potentially growing. So over just the past couple of years, we have opened multiple new markets, and also on that front, probably then getting the identity verification in place is one of the easiest tasks in the geographical expansion. So I think, like, to summarize these things, in order, kind of, it's super important for us that we can simplify our platform through a partnership. Where we, with basically single integration, get access to multiple different local opportunities. We get important supports, insights, also this landscape. Well, I would like to say that it's evolving rapidly. It's not evolving rapidly to our needs. We are faster than that. But whenever there are developments from the regulation point of view or adoption point of view, we get the support and insights, and then can take that into account in our plans. It's also important that the solutions are flexible. So for example, even if the eID as such doesn't work in all the countries, there is a fallback solution, and we don't need to figure it out ourselves in the worst case market by market. It's a relatively kind of compliance in general. It's a relatively heavy layer, and just like thinking about the alternative scenario where we would have needed to integrate with every single service provider ourselves, would have been completely unmanageable. So we are happy to be in this point, and eagerly looking forward what the regulation brings along, and then what are the new opportunities that we have together with Signicat in the space. But I think that's from my part.
Thank you, Anniina. Extremely insightful presentation. Now I'd like to sum up, and then we'll go directly into the questions afterwards. So the key takeaways from both Allard and Anniina's presentation for me are, firstly, cross-border companies have a big challenge, especially if they are operating across Europe. They have a challenge in onboarding users in and from all different regions with different regulatory and fast evolving regulatory landscapes, and also different user attitudes to identity verification. The cross-border companies need to present the users with familiar identification methods to boost trust and also the conversion. They need the flexibility in order to do that, to use both eIDs and eIDVs, or both in conjunction. And doing that through a single platform versus integrating many different solutions, including the technical and legal complexity, is much, much more preferred. And the other sort of insight that I sort of took away is that use case determines the need. Even in high eID regions, there can be a need for eIDV. Whether you are trying to onboard a user, whether you're trying to step up security in case of elevated risk of fraud, whether you're trying to produce qualified electronic signatures, there is the need for using eIDs and eIDVs in conjunction. And Signicat, as your advisor, with our expertise in the most appropriate identity verification method to use to optimize user experience, security, and conversions in the complex and evolving European regulatory landscape is a good proposition. Signicat is also your technology partner with the relevant, all the relevant methods you need through a single platform. This was all our sort of presentation. I hope you all took something away from that. And now I'm going to take a look at the chat for the questions that are coming up. I think the first question is for you, Allard. Signicat has the world's largest eID hub with 35 eIDs, and we're always expanding it. You talked about Moji ID, you talked about SPID, which in both cases we were the first international provider to provide these eIDs. What's the next eID we will offer to our customers? What's coming up? That's the question.
The next one. The next one is most likely going to be the Czech bank ID, actually. So we are investigating now the Czech Republic. The Czech bank ID is one of the most reliable ones with a great use and a great reach among the population and the best level of assurance, I think. So that's the most likely candidate, yes.
Great, thank you. Looking again at the questions. Again, this is for Allard, I think. What are the main challenges businesses face when implementing eIDs and eIDVs for cross-border operations, and how can these be addressed?
Yeah, I think the biggest one is that they're all different. And that's really a challenge. So to give an example, we integrated a lot of eID methods, right? And some of those integrations took maybe 4 or 6 weeks or so, and were quite straightforward. And also the legal part was more or less straightforward. Usually takes a little bit longer, but there are eIDs out there that are so complicated, both on a technological level and what you can do on a legal level, because you have to make certain promises on what type of use cases are allowed and what are not, and etc. That they take a really long time. So I think the differences between all those different methods is actually the biggest challenge.
Okay. And Anniina, I think the next question is for you. You talked about growth across borders and the fact that all the challenges you face there. This question says, what have been the most challenging things you faced when setting up the systems and processes for identity verification?
Yeah, so I think there are like two perspectives into setting up. First is the technical part, and then there is the operational part. But actually, even before we got there, when we received the payment institution license in Finland, we actually started off by doing things manually and reaching out to merchants and requesting information and identification, kind of verification, passport copies and stuff like that. And first of all, I can say that it's 100 times harder than like setting up this kind of technical solution for that. I think the technical part as such in this cooperation that we have has been the non-issue. Even though we have very capable engineers who have been building the integrations and so forth, it's been super straightforward and convenient. On the operational side, again, then having single partner has made it very easy to cooperate and set up. I think one of the things that we have been always a bit kind of, we have acknowledged it, that especially in Europe, our footprint is in Southeast European markets, and they are different from Western European markets in terms of digital capabilities and behaviors. So I think, as I mentioned already, we have had to teach customers, and we have acknowledged it already from the early on that we are probably the first ones, which has led to situations where we have had to resolve like unique questions and challenges on IDs accepted and so forth. But even with that, kind of resolving one question at the time hasn't really slowed us down. So it's been ultimately probably easier than we expected.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. And I think you addressed the next question slightly, Anniina. The next question was, from Wolt's perspective, what has been the most significant benefit of using a single vendor solution for identity verification? But if you want to add anything, please do.
Yeah, no, I think in the summary, it's been critical. So with the current footprint of 21 markets, we couldn't have managed without.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we only have one more question, time for one more question, and it has to be quick. Allard, I think this one's for you. How do eIDs and eIDVs help address compliance requirements in different regions? And what should businesses consider when implementing these?
Yeah, compliance. So it depends a bit, of course, on what the compliance regime is that is applicable. But usually our customers are regulated industries, right, or from all over the place, whether it's from having a payment license, as Wolt does, or insurance companies, banking, and even gambling is regulated these days. So they usually use us. And I think one of the biggest challenges is to keep up with compliance, right? Because we have an AML regulation now, but that is about to change, and then there are the different regional implementations of that regulation. So keeping up with all those different compliance regimes is one of the major challenges, and that is, I think I mentioned that briefly, but of course, we need to make sure that we stay compliant with all those different compliance regimes and make sure that our solutions stay compliant, so that our customers basically can remain compliant to the different compliance regimes. And that is one of the key benefits, or the key takeaways, or the key characteristics of our platform, that we try to do that and try to be as complete as possible in there.
Great, thanks, Allard. And there are actually many more questions in the chat, which we will we will answer every one of them with as a follow-up email. There are some really good questions in there, but we need to wrap up today. Thank you, Allard and Anniina, for sharing your expertise and insights with us today. We've seen how identity verification, especially through eIDs and eIDVs, can be a powerful tool for seamless cross-border growth. Anniina shared a fantastic example from Wolt's expansion journey. And before we wrap up, I'd like to mention our upcoming State of Digital Identity Report 2024-2025, which will be published very soon. This report explores the latest trends and strategies in identity verification across various countries in Europe. It does deep dives into each country as well. You will be the first to access it. We will share it with you after the webinar, along with the answers to the questions that we haven't been able to answer today. Thank you all for joining us, and we hope today's discussion has offered valuable insights, and we look forward to seeing you at our next event. Have a lovely day.